Welcome to episode 236 of the Grip Strip Podcast, the Unchartered Territory edition of the Grip Strip Podcast. Good call on that, man. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host. My 49ers went and won yesterday, and I'm very happy about that. I didn't bowl so well, but at least my football team won. Of course, I always do this show with my co-host, the iRacing Indy 500 champion, computer genius, a gentleman and a scholar, and wordsmith with the great title today. Unfortunately, the Jacksonville Jaguars did not follow suit on Sunday, and it seems like rinse and repeat based on what we just talked about. His name is Josh Refine. What's going on, man?
Doing great, Phil. Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, Jacksonville Jaguars lost on Sunday to Miami Dolphins. We'll get into that later. I also lost in my fantasy teams, in my work league, and in this league. So not off to a great start here in week 1 in 2024, but it's only week 1. That's what I've been trying to cope with right now. So that's what I'm going with. But as far as playoffs week 1 here at Atlanta this past weekend, of course. A lot of things happening in this race, and ready to get into it.
Yeah, Pizza Face went out and got that victory. Looked like it was a Penske versus I was going to say Ganassi, a Trackhouse battle where Daniel Suarez almost swept the season at Atlanta, but Ross Chastain got separated from his teammate. The Dale option did not happen for Daniel Suarez. And Ryan Blaney on the other side was able to push Joey Logano forward and help get Logano a second Atlanta win in his career and lock himself into the round of 12. Give them momentum going into the rest of this playoff. Usually in the even years, Joey Logano seems to figure out a way to win championships, and so could he somehow or another do it again? At least he's put himself in position to do that here. So we'll get in all that with what Joey Logano did. Kyle Larson, there's news today about Kyle Larson and some of the racing he's going to be doing in 2025. But on Sunday, he had an issue early in the race. He hits the fence, comes back down the track, and the guy who wins the Southern 500 the week before, Chase Briscoe, to get into the playoff, promptly ass packs him and ends his day, finishes dead last, and now is 20 points out of the cutoff, while Kyle Larson's only a few points ahead in the cutoff after being second in the regular season points. So it tells you how volatile the playoffs are when you reset everything. So we'll get into all the incidents and stuff. Dennis Hamlin, who's in the news for multiple reasons, had an interesting analytical based strategy where he essentially did the Dale Jarrett. They can call it analytics, but based on all that I've heard and read, it's the Dale Jarrett. And he still got wrecked, which means it went nowhere. People have been kind of creaming Denny for that move or that decision, but when you look at the way super speedway racing is these days, the Dale Jarrett is not such a bad idea if you can avoid the wrecks. We'll get into all that stuff, the points heading into Watkins Glen, and we'll also talk about Hank Hill going and getting another speedway win, largely due to the fact that Corey Heim sold out Chandler Smith again at Atlanta, because I always remember when he was running limited races at Kyle Busch Motorsports in the 51 truck, and then he went and won the race when Chandler Smith was driving the 18. He's a regular driver he's trying to run for the points championship. Yeah, I always remember that. So then when that happened and I'm watching, it's a typical Xfinity race, they don't all start racing for themselves and allowed that inbred dipshit to win again at Atlanta. Unfortunately, gives them another win, some more playoff points. We'll talk about other key players, and we'll also give a points update because we're getting 2 races to go in the regular season for the Xfinity Series before their playoffs start. NASCAR, like I said about Dennis Hamlin, they did an ultimatum for the charters and the new agreement. All but 2 teams agreed to said agreement. Those 2 teams are 23XI and Front Row Motorsports. Now, it's interesting. We could get into that. The dynamics of both of those teams relative to some of these teams that took the deal. Then we'll get into Larson announcing that he's going to do the double again, which everybody knew he was going to do. Supposedly had signed a 2-year deal with McLaren anyway. So, and we know who the fuck his sponsor is, so that wasn't an issue. So I guess whatever, they had to do some logistics and whatever to hopefully coordinate the double. I mean, next year, of course, all of the IndyCar races will be on Fox. And then the NASCAR race will be the first race on Amazon Prime, right? Isn't that what it is? Yeah. Dale Jr.'s return to the booth will be at the Coca-Cola 600. So on Amazon Prime. So they might start that race a little later just to give Larson an opportunity to get there. Hopefully the weather does cooperate them. We'll get into NFL Week 1. It definitely wasn't phenomenal by any means in terms of some of the play, whether it was from quarterbacks, whether it was defense, whether it was god-awful officiating, like Kansas City the amount of illegal procedure penalties they called on Baltimore, and John Harbaugh being caught on camera saying you're not calling it both ways, and then Nick Bosa getting mugged, like absolutely getting mauled the way that his inbred heroes would probably do to, or his inbred brothers were doing to Tyreek Hill on Sunday, last night in Monday Night Football. So that was a whole other thing. Getting a fantasy, won in 2 leagues, lost in 2 leagues. So there's that. But it's week 1, of course, like Josh said. We'll see the Roundup, shorter Roundup this week. Rally Greece for WRC. World Superbikes at Magny Cours last week. Then we have Formula 2 at Baku. And then Supercars with the throwback weekend, the Sandown 500, which will showcase a Castrol Mustang, just like at Darlington earlier this year for Brad Keselowski when he went and won that race. The 55 Castrol Mustang for Tickford Racing is also throwing back to the Supra of the Japanese GT Championship. So that hopefully is good vibes, and maybe they can go out there and go to Sandown, get that victory in a major in one of the enduros. And then NHRA starts their playoffs at Maple Grove. We'll see where my money is at. I might go and take a run out there, but right now it doesn't look like it's going to be, but we'll see what happens. Stranger things have happened. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix will be this weekend for Formula 1. Adrian Newey officially signs with Aston Martin. So that was big news. So we'll get into that, make our picks for that race. Then the championship finale at Nashville Super Speedway. Scott Borchetta is all in on this one, promoting the crap out of it, selling seats, the whole bit. But in the end, will Alex Palou really spit the bit here in this spot after what he's done all year? Or will he be able to go out there and make the run that he needs to do and get his third IndyCar championship in 4 years, which is pretty sick to think about what he's done in an IndyCar. Then we'll talk about Cup and Xfinity at Watkins Glen this year in the fall, also right at the end of summer and in the playoff. Next year they'll go back to their August date, which basically had been their date since they came back. NASCAR came back in the 80s. We'll make our picks for that race, for those races, and the Cup Series has a softer tire that is going to fall off a lot, so that could add a little bit of intrigue to a race that has become way more processional in recent years. Josh will let us know all things going on in the world of iRacing in the sim segment, and we will close the deal. First things first, though, is the Quaker State 400. At Atlanta, first race of the playoffs, and it was Joey Logano getting the victory on Sunday, leading 9 out of the top 10 were playoff drivers. You had Logano, Suarez, Blaney, Bell, Bowman, lots of B's. Then Tyler Reddick, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Austin Cindric, who led the most laps on Sunday and won a stage. Blaney won the other stage. And Logano goes out and gets the victory. So that was a top 10. Credit to the likes of Daniel Hemrick and Justin Haley, just outside the top 10. Richard finishes 14th. Actually had a decent points day. LaJoy was 15th. The playoff drivers after the top 10, Keebler Gibbs was 17th, Brad Keselowski 19th, Dennis Hamlin 24th, Harrison Burton 31st, Martin Truex Jr. 35th with I think accident. He had issues. He had a wreck, I think, and then he hit a mechanical. That was on lap 206. He was involved in that wreck there. So, and then the aforementioned Larson and Briscoe rounding out the field. But I mean, what do we have here? 24 lead changes amongst 14 drivers. You had, a lot of drivers that were able to score stage points. But essentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 were 8 of those drivers were in both stages. Got points in both stages. Cindric looked like he had the piece to win, which would have been huge for him, which would have advanced him into the round of 12. But top 10 finish doesn't hurt him by any means. I think Suarez, another one. Both of those guys were guys that had, victories that we could say are probably lucky victories. May have been a fluke kind of deal, but they ran well. So they gave themselves an opportunity to keep going. Harrison Burton, fluky win, Daytona, and then he runs like what he's run like for the majority of his 3 years of his Cup career. Briscoe wins the week before, gets and destroys himself the next week, and puts himself in a big hole. Larson, with all the points he had accumulated, basically lost his whole entire points gap in the span of that. In the span of 55 laps, he went from being second in points to 10th. 15 points ahead of the cutoff. So 15 points ahead of 13th place Brad Keselowski, who's in the mix. He's only 2 points out of 11th. Then you have Burton, Truex, and Briscoe, who are going to need help, a lot of help, to go and make it into the next round. But I mean, you mentioned it in with the discussion there, Josh. I mean, the Penske guys, the Fords have been great at these drafting or whatever, drafting tracks here recently, especially with this car. Logano has had an off year relative to his standard. Blaney has been the lead dog, and honestly, that started last year in the playoff. Blaney has been the lead dog, been the best Ford basically the entire year. In this instance, though, Joey Logano shows why. He's a two-time champion. And Paul Wolf, two-time champion crew chief. They made the right decisions, put themselves in the right spot. And in the end, Joey Logano, as much as many people like to hate him, he's one of the best there is right now in the sport. 34 wins and 2 championships proves that. And he's basically won the vast majority of the majors. So gets a win theoretically at home, because it used to be his home, one of the suites at Atlanta Motor Speedway for many years of his life. And sets himself up for a possible run at a third championship and real immortality if that comes off, Josh.
Yeah, somehow, I mean, Joey Logano could be in possible third title contender, because all you need to do really is win Atlanta, and then if he wins Talladega or Kansas, which I think those are 2 tracks that he's really good at, and then win Las Vegas, then easily Joey Logano could go into Phoenix. And we know how Ford has been, how Penske has been there the last 2 seasons, and they could easily just roll in there and win the championships. So it's very possible, for Joey Logano to come out with this title. So looking at Joey Logano for what he's done this season, has been way off. You had, like you said, that lucky win at New Hampshire, or at Nashville for Logano, and definitely that was very lucky in terms of how the green, white, and checker had flown. But a lot of unlucky moments this year. But certainly he was up front at the right time here at Atlanta. A lot of lucky, or good pushes that he benefited from Ryan Blaney, who did a good job representing his sponsor there, and Dent Wizard throughout the race. So throughout the end. So the battle there with Suarez, who another guy that you can say that maybe that win at Atlanta earlier this year was kind of fluky, but certainly him and Ross Chastain were up front at the end, and looked like maybe Suarez was in position to steal one and possibly make it out of the round of 16. So this is a fairly interesting race, and domination by all of Penske, like most of that race. Of course, Cindric led a ton of laps and kind of faded towards the end, but still finished in top 10. Ryan Blaney, of course, had a good run too, and managed to come back from the accident that he got into with Chris Buescher, Martin Truex, and I guess SVG. So that was a good comeback by them. They only had door damage, I think, on the side, so they're able to make those repairs and get back to the front. So close there on the prediction. Of course, Ryan Blaney was my pick, but got close there. But at least he comes away with a third place finish there to open this round and stays in the playoff standing, stays in first place here. So, of course, Suarez in currently for the next round, but I'm sure that win would have helped him, and it would have helped him later on in this playoff as well. So Penske, of course, they came out, and Ford really, Michael McDowell on pole for this race. So Ford continuing to show just how fast they are on these drafting tracks, and expect the same as the series goes to Talladega in the next round. So we'll see how it goes the rest of this round. Of course, we got Watkins Glen coming up, which maybe could be normal, but we've also seen a lot of things happen over the years, and then Bristol to close this first round. So still a lot to go in this first two races, or first two races of the round in this playoffs. So for some of these other guys, though, of course, lots of stuff happened. So puts them in a bad position, like you said, like Kyle Larson, which I like to kind of call these playoff points, the insurance premiums, and definitely used up his premium there. Of course, Briscoe did not have much there on his merit, because he only won one race and only that. So there was definitely lots of unfortunate things happen there. And then you mentioned Denny Hamlin pulling off the Dale Jarrett, and I'll counter that by saying he should have just done the Dale Jr. and run up front, like Dale Jr. had always said over the years. Running up front was where he wanted to be, because it would.
And Dennis Hamlin has done many times too.
Yeah, he has done many times too. But of course, as of late, like I mentioned in the algorithm pick last week, maybe that's the jinx right there for him. But the algorithm pick last week, of course, picked Denny Hamlin, and I said, well, it makes sense because, Denny Hamlin is kind of a wild card these days in next gen super speedway racing, because of the fact that he's just been taken out in wrecks so many times, and I guess strategy, even though he's running up front this time, to go and run in the back, but then not make up any stage points, and now goes from being in a pretty solid position, I would say, goes from that to possibly being on the outside, or close to the outside looking in here. Still has a handful of points, but I'm sure you would have liked to have had a better cushion than just being 11th in the standings. So for Hamlin, not a great start either for him in the playoffs. So there was just a lot that happened here in this race. And even though it was Atlanta and they run pretty close together, a lot of times you still saw a lot of volatility throughout the field.
And with the way that the track is wearing out, it's putting more handling into play. I mean, obviously they want the drafting aspect for the crowd, but I think also the handling's coming into play there, which is going to affect the racing. May separate them a little bit. Might make it a little more different as we move forward. I mean, you brought up Larson's deal. He didn't lose a ton of points. I mean, the Hamlin, like you brought up Hamlin too. Hamlin lost all those points with that penalty, and he had a huge cushion, just like Larson. He probably would be right there with Larson points wise, instead of being minus 43 off the lead and being only 2 points ahead of Brad Keselowski. He'd probably be about 15 points ahead of Brad if he didn't have that massive penalty. And so that could come back and haunt him. I mean, all the different ways Denny Hamlin's figured out to lose championships. Now they'll go and get a engine penalty or whatever the hell it was, and that'll be the reason that ends him this year. I mean, you brought up Blaney, Dent Wizard, and all the tape they used to basically put the left side back together. Looked like Mark Martin's car from Darlington back in the day, and he still finished third in it. So there you go. I mean, right now the mix, I think you got about 7 drivers that are inside of 20 points. Bell and Reddick have been up there the vast majority of the year. Logano's free rolling for a couple of weeks. Bowman had a run that he needed to give himself a chance. So did Gumby. I think Suarez, if he can have 2 decent runs, probably has given himself an opportunity to move on. Clyde is Clyde, going to one of his best racetracks, albeit that was in the Gen 6 car. His road racing prowess hasn't theoretically converted over to the Gen 7. But we'll get into that later, kind of like Denny Hamlin and his super speedway prowess. So we'll see what happens with that in terms of the points. For the outside of the top 16, Chastain is only 5 points ahead of Christopher Buescher. And Bubba's 19 points behind Chastain. So that's something out there. There's money, obviously, going all the way through, I think, top 25, if you can go out there and make something happen there. So, so that's that for the race at Atlanta on the Cup side. And where are we at here? Yeah, so when in Penske, talked about Hamlin. So we'll move forward to Hank Hill going and getting his win at Atlanta in the Focused Health 250. Another victory for him at Atlanta. It was Hill over Parker Kligerman and AJ Allmendinger, so I think that's 3 RCR cars there. Chandler Smith, Corey Heim, 4th and 5th. Jesse Love started on pole, finished 6th. Sammy Smith, Josh Williams, Buckshot Jones, and Ryan Truex, who was, you think your pick, Josh, or your pick for the race. I picked Jesse Love, but we all had, I think got all the regular picks we got were in the top 10. The algorithm pick had Parker Retzlaff, who was 12th. So look at that. 5 driver choices, and all of them finished inside the top 12. So there you go. And you go look at some of these other drivers. Ryan Sieg, who was in the points, he finished 32nd, got wrecked. Custer, the Justin Allgaier, they all, I think, were wrecked together. That was a wreck with lap 150, 146. And that took out the Stewart-Haas duo. It took out Jesse Love was involved in it. Allgaier, the 19, which I think was Taylor Gray. Yeah, that happened up in the front, and that was Ryan Sieg had a problem where he started 2 laps down, or I don't know how many laps down in the race, and had to come back from it. He was able to, got back to the front, and then promptly got wrecked there. So unfortunate for him, trying to give himself an opportunity to make the playoff there. Lost a lot of points. But the Hill hasn't had a lot of momentum going for him in a positive way for a few months. So him getting another win sets himself up for the playoff run. And I don't think he is a favorite per se, but obviously when you have another super speedway coming up at Talladega, you have other racetracks that have been good to him over the years. He's probably given himself an opportunity again, I would say for, at least an outside shot for the championship. I don't think he's run well enough, honestly, to really truly think about being a championship contender. Yes, he's won 3 races, but he's kind of got William Byron syndrome where he's all or nothing. And in the playoff, if you're all or nothing, you're just as likely to go home. So we'll see what happens with that. But what were your takeaways, Josh, on this race on Saturday?
Well, you mentioned, us, like, neither of us really picked Austin Hill in this one, and he's only won before this. He had only won at Atlanta, which I guess we should have went go figure there, and at Daytona, but that was all the way back at the beginning of the year, and for Austin Hill hasn't really done a whole lot since then. Although he is 4th in points, so definitely has had a lot of negative momentum here until this win, and seemed like he kind of lost favor. I mean, even more favor with the fans than he already has. So in the past, so with the incident that he had with Custer back in Charlotte in May, that was definitely one of his lowlights of the year. But Austin Hill goes out here and wins in Atlanta, and just ends up getting the victory, only leading 12 laps here in this one, and fended off the efforts of Chandler Smith and Corey Heim there on the last lap. Of course, Corey Heim went to the high side and tried to go for the win, which he pushed Austin Hill there instead of going with Chandler Smith there on the last lap. But he was going for the win rather than trying to help the corporate teammate there, or manufacturer teammate there, and Chandler Smith, so in the Toyota, so and Corey Heim driving for the Sam Hunt Toyota team. So that was definitely kind of an interesting race there with how it was playing out. Justin Allgaier was leading for a good portion of the race, and then ended up having an accident and had to retire from the race. Took out Cole Custer as well in that one. So it was a pretty big wreck there, and red flag. Jesse Love was involved too, and Jesse Love, and then it was Taylor Gray. So lots of guys that got torn out, taken out of that race that were contenders. But now that opened the door, of course, for Austin Hill to potentially have some something happen in that race, and he was able to make moves. AJ Allmendinger was up there, led a lot of laps, finally got a stage point as well. So definitely a good run for Allmendinger after not having a lot of success here in Xfinity here in this season. So hasn't won yet in here. So you wonder when he might win a race. Got a big opportunity to come up here at Watkins Glen. Josh Williams had a good run. Of course, you picked him as your wild card. So that was definitely a good effort there for him after he's been having a terrible season. Brandon Jones had a good run when he's on the way out from Junior Motorsports back to Joe Gibbs Racing. So that was definitely a good effort for our picks there and the algorithm pick. I think this race, they talk about the Xfinity style of racing and the Cup style of racing, and I mean, I think both have their pros and cons. I feel like this one, you can kind of see the handling characteristics a little bit more. You could kind of see cars getting loose off turn 2 and off of turn 4 here, especially when they're single file. I felt like it was a little bit more pronounced. Of course, they wrecked harder, like Kyle Larson did in the Cup Series, which kind of illustrates how the Cup car is kind of like an IndyCar in a way, and how it handles. But this race, you could kind of see just how much the Xfinity car is different handling on this track. Not only that, but just the repave as well. How much already it's worn off in only 2 years since they did the repave. So the differences that you saw there in the style of racing made for kind of 2 different races, and I think this one a little bit boring in terms of how the racing played out, because it was little bit more difficult to pass. But of course, Cup, you had the runs that you were able to generate. So that was just something that I noticed watching this race or trying to pay attention to this race at the gym, I guess, on Saturdays. So being able to follow that. But Austin Hill, I guess, pads his stats a little bit going into the playoffs. 3 wins here in the season, so 4th in points. So definitely an opportunity for him to maybe make a charge in the playoffs. We'll see. There's definitely a few tracks for him to potentially make it down to Phoenix as part of the championship 4, but he's probably going to need a little bit more luck going here into all the playoff races that we have coming up, especially Talladega, where he can probably win that race and then get into the round of 8 in Xfinity, and then possibly just run good at Las Vegas and Homestead, and then boom, he's in the Phoenix championship 4. So it's definitely an opportunity for Austin Hill here. So guess he kind of turns around a little bit here at Atlanta.
Yeah, he does what he usually does, winning at drafting tracks. But I mean, we remember last November at Martinsville when him and his teammate got into it late, and what looked like a guarantee to make the Final 4 went away in the final turn. So Jesse Love isn't going to clean him out, but I think for a spot in the Final 4, Jesse Love has been known for doing that sort of thing. So, but somebody else might clean out Austin Hill because he's a tool. The points right now, 2 races to go in the regular season. Cole Custer was a points leader for a good amount of the year, but had some bad runs here recently, and that screwed him over. Allgaier, on the strength of the 14 stage wins and 2 race wins, leads by 34 points over Custer. Chandler Smith is minus 67, and then Austin Hill minus 71. A.J. Allmendinger, 5th. Best driver without a win. 21 points ahead of Sheldon Creed, who's 2nd best driver without a win. We got, so Ryan Sieg right now there. He's in 11th overall in points, 44 points behind Sammy Smith. Go back out to the playoff standings. Yeah, so that's what it is. 44 points for Ryan Sieg. You have Allmendinger plus 144, Sheldon Creed plus 123. I think with a good solid run on Saturday, both Allmendinger and Creed will be in. And then it'll be left to Kligerman, Sammy Smith, and Ryan Sieg to battle for those last 2 spots in the playoffs, unless something happens, one of them wins, whatever. So we will see what happens there. Okay, we'll move into the news. The charter agreement or forced agreement, where they were basically given an ultimatum to go and sign the charter agreement, but in the end, every team but the 2311 and the Front Row Motorsports team signed it. It says, term of the charters for 7 years, commensurate management deal. You signed or did not get the permanency of the system, had been negotiating for more revenue. Last pay charter at 45, go to about 8.5. Oh, okay. So David facing Goliath for with nowhere close to signing proposed charters as well, pressured and compelled to sign the agreement under significant duress. 2311 viewed terms particularly harmful to our operation and our ownership group's interests in intellectual property rights. And then Bob Jenkins also for Front Row Motorsports. Team concerns are also very similar to those raised by 2311, and said it wasn't feasible for Front Row to sign the extension on short notice. So they so I mean it's interesting, Josh. We hear about it. I think, what was it, on Friday or Saturday? We hear about that, I think, Saturday morning, and Brad Keselowski's out there saying, well, you have to give and take with these kind of negotiations, and while they may not be ideal, it's better than what they had, blah, blah, blah. I think that seems to be the people towing the line, a lot of these owners. But you have 2311, which is bringing a lot of new thoughts and knowledge into the sport, and a lot of marketing, branding, with, of course, MJ. And his thought, understanding sports franchises, being the only African American owner of a major sports franchise at one point, which was, of course, the Hornets. And then the way they run business, Denny Hamlin, the way he wants to run a business together. And then you have Bob Jenkins, who is a restaurateur and a franchisee for Yum Brands in terms of their, Long John Silver's, KFC, et cetera, and made his money that way and is still in that, but built his team from being a start and park, basically, a team that was a field filler, to Michael McDowell's 4 or 5 poles this year. They were actually a possibility with Todd Gilliland to possibly make the playoffs. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic that those two teams chose to. But then you think about some of these other new teams, like Trackhouse decided to go with it. Colleague went with it. Now, I think Colleague's situation, it makes a lot more sense because they suck. And it's probably solid ground for them to try and rebuild. Rick Ware, of course, signing it. Who cares? It's Rick Ware, but I mean, he employed the guy that won the top fuel class in the U.S. Nationals a few weeks ago, in Clay Milliken. So, and it's a decent ride in IndyCar too. So, for all the shit that he has, but a lot of the major owners, the likes of Fat Felon and Reverend Gibbs and Roger Penske, they all signed this agreement, and they're all well-to-do. So it's interesting. I don't know what your thoughts are. I mean, I get the 2311 angle for sure. I completely get the 2311 angle, because they've been outspoken between Denny, especially Denny, but, MJ being who he is, and the business savvy that he has shown over the past 40 years. 40 plus years. NASCAR is stuck in the past, and in terms of growth of the sport, they aren't growing the sport as much as they may want to make other people believe. And like charter pricing and whatever is an example of that. You look at both of these teams also. That's an interesting thing I brought up in regards to the charters, because both of them are either, in the case of Front Row, they bought a charter from Stewart Haas, and for all intents and purposes, the 2311 is going to get a charter. Then you have, and Trackhouse bought one of the Stewart Haas charters. So those are the three. And of those three, 2 of those teams did not sign off on this. So it's interesting how that all worked out. But what are you thinking in regards to that, Josh? I mean, how does this end, really, for both of those teams, let alone what kind of resolution is this going to end up being? Are they going to end up getting more? Are they going to have everyone re-sign something different? What comes from this?
Well, I think first of all, with how this ends up playing out, I mean, I could see 2311 potentially pushing this, like getting a team of lawyers together and potentially pushing this to like the federal level with the courts and then suing NASCAR. And I don't know how that would play out, which that would be big if that happened. And how it would they end up settling out of court for some undisclosed amount of money or something like that. I mean, that would be typical, but or possibly forcing a redrafting of the agreement for all the teams or anything. And I mean, hopefully it doesn't result in them like just folding, because that would be a huge waste. I mean, I don't think that would happen given the amount of money they've invested in, but certainly, that could be a possibility there. But for Denny, outspoken, been outspoken, especially since the podcast came out for him and everything. And there allegedly is an anti-disparagement clause in this charter agreement, and obviously he's not going to sign that because he wouldn't be able to criticize NASCAR when he needs to, and being an owner and all that. So that's definitely something that needs to be revised or thrown out altogether in there. I think there's another point about teams wanting NASCAR to basically pay, or the charter, I guess, or they need to have enough revenue where they aren't going in the red, because it seems like I think NASCAR is willing to pay up to $11 million a year for revenue that they'd get, but the teams need 18 to be able to cover a whole season for one car, and they wouldn't be as reliable on sponsorship money in that case. So my take on that is, I mean, they should be able to be funded the full amount of 18 million or whatever the number is, and then be able to run, be able to run for profit. But not only that, but maybe teams wouldn't have to put together all these like B2B deals or whatever they call it to have sponsors, and we could probably get back to having full-time sponsors or longer sponsorships like we used to have in the 2000s, like we saw with all the recognizable names there, of course, like Dale Jr. with Budweiser, Jeff Gordon with DuPont, Jimmy Johnson with Lowe's, Tony Stewart with the Home Depot, which almost all those sponsors are out of the sport, or they've gone and changed names, and now today we have some associations, but it's not as prominent. You have Bush, or Bud is out of the sport, now it's Bush. So Anheuser-Busch still in the sport, Ross Chastain, but they're marketing Busch Light these days, and then, which I don't even think is that recognizable, but maybe it is. Exalta is with William Byron, but they're on and off the car. I think the only car that's actually full time is Kyle Larson, and that's basically just Hendrick funding him there as a sponsor. Logano's with Penske or Pennzoil, and they're not on the car the entire time as well. So I wondered, if they were able to get to a full funded number, whatever that is, 18 million or whatever, could they get to a point where we could have more brand recognition? So, which certainly would build relationship with drivers and the fans, and we can get back to kind of what we saw in the 2000s. I mean, it is interesting because for 2311, they're one of the teams that have different sponsorship packages every week, because Bubba Wallace has about like 5 or 6 sponsors per year. He's got McDonald's, the Air Force, Leidos, the Defense Technology Company. He's got Columbia, and I don't know what the other one is, because there's
what's the money one?
Moneyline.
Moneyline. There you go.
Yeah. So He's got that, and then they also swap with almost all those sponsors are also on the 45. McDonald's and Moneyline are on the 45, and then Jordan brand is on the 45 since Bubba has the Columbia deal, and then Monster and the Beast Monster are on the 45 as well. So, if they were able to go to a point where they could be fully funded, then maybe Bubba Wallace could just be the McDonald's car and build that, because I feel like he has the most recognition when he's on the McDonald's car, and then Reddick can be on Monster, just continue that relationship that they have there. So, or just even the Jordan brand, I guess. So that would be an instance there where they wouldn't have to put all these deals together. That would definitely benefit 2311 and everything. And it was interesting hearing some of these comments from the teams because it seems like NASCAR sent out a memo, like allegedly a day before, or they gave him a very small window of time and said, you got to sign this by midnight on Friday or something. And the teams were like, oh, Hendrick signed. He was like, I'm just tired of it. I mean, great response. I'm just tired of it. Jeff Gordon didn't feel like they'd get a better deal. I think Childress allegedly, I mean, it's not, it's anonymous, but they called it NASCAR as a communist regime, which that sounds like either something that Childress said or Keselowski said. And then Keselowski said that this would be the best deal that they could get here. So, teams feeling like they're kind of forced to and coerced to do this. Seemingly, I mean, it's like Congress, when Congress has a bill that they try to pass and it's got 500 pages, and then they put a bunch of stuff and then they go to vote on it and nobody actually reads what's in it and everything, kind of like that, I think, with NASCAR and this charter agreement, and NASCAR just kind of forcing everybody like, hey, just sign it and we can move on and get everything together so we don't have to worry about this in the playoffs. And I think 2311 with the with Jordan, with the amount of experience that he has being an NBA owner and understanding revenue streams and trying to be profitable as a business, understands that they can't go on forever the same old ways where racing, the old saying that you got to spend money to make money in racing. Maybe that they can figure out a different way to actually be in the green, because even Hendrick Motorsports has been in the red since like 2014. So, which is shocking considering they're the most successful team in the sport. So, when they're financially doing bad, that means it's probably bad for everybody else. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and hopefully we can see a good resolution here, and be interesting to kind of play this storyline. But yeah, of course, with 2311 and Front Row not signing the agreement, and of course Front Row, their deal, Bob Jenkins is the restaurant owner. He's not a part of Yum Brands officially, but he's got a bunch of franchises, and he's probably been has been using that money to fund his team, and so he's been in the red too. So for those two teams, they said, well, if they don't sign, they could possibly get their charters revoked, and I guess it'd be up to them to pick and choose when they go race, or they'd race as an open team as they did. I think Wood Brothers Racing back in 2016, they were unchartered, I think, for the first couple years of that agreement. And then eventually they got a charter agreement, but they raced without one, and they were an open team until they proved that they were successful. So maybe they do something like that. But it's going to be interesting to see, and that's why we called this title tonight Unchartered Territory, because we haven't really seen this type of situation play out, I guess, in this charter agreement era.
Yeah, I know that. I think the Woods ran the first year without one, then they leased one, and then eventually it all, like you said, they came up with one. They were able to get one through teams that sold off or whatever. I mean, the funny part is with those two teams, they're like, oh, well, they're not going to have charters. And my question is, who's going to buy them? You're going to have 5, 6 charter. You're going to have 17% of the field. You're going to eliminate that, or you're going to try to, and there's nobody that's there. Like Hendrick has his maximum, and he's not happy. You were talking about Bob Jenkins and his business savvy. RFK signed the deal, but they're not there's a rumor that maybe they're the ones that getting that charter, not what's it called? Because I'm also trying to figure out, figure out the logistics of all these charters now, because SVG is running a third car and supposedly they have a charter. Then you have 2311 who's supposedly going to get one, but maybe they aren't. Front Row already got one. You have Haas Factory, whatever, so just the Haas part of Stuart Haas got rid of 3, kept 1. So they're a Roush affiliate. Supposedly Hendrick has Justin Haley under contract, if you believe those spotters on that one podcast. And there's limbo between them and him and Alex Bowman towards who's going to drive the 48, or drive for Spire. I really don't understand who's going to buy those. What, is NASCAR going to buy all 6 of those charters? That's part of what they wanted. They said that Francis wanted to be able to own some of these charters. So now they want to dictate the price of these things now. Even though they get a piece of everything, I think, with all of these damn charters, but they used to have 43 cars and they used to have 50 cars show up to races. You're lucky to have 40 for any race outside of the Daytona 500. I don't understand what kind of business model you're running when you're reducing the field and it gets smaller and smaller and you're running out of owners. Like, you had that little bonanza there a few years ago when MJ got in, Justin Marks got in, and Matt Collig came in. And then I guess you can add to an extent Brad joining with Roush and the Fenway Group. That was all within a year or whatever. But other than that, who the hell's coming to the sport? NY Racing, they're not really a team. The money team, they're not really a team. There ain't jack shit. So there is no growth. The marketing, whatever your plan or marketing, doesn't work. Because, like Josh brought up, the identities of these cars, these numbers, you put the driver, the sponsor, and the number, they all went together. Like, I'm going to hold up this, it's blurred out, but there's Quaker State, and, I can't get, Glidden, you saw it over there.
Tony Stewart's old helmet from the 90s, right?
That was his IndyCar helmet when he drove for John Menard. When you think about Menards, you think about Glidden paint and the Dayglow highlighter colors of that. When you think about Indy cars and Al Unser Jr., he drove the Valvoline car and he drove the Marlboro car. He also drove other cool cars. He drove the Domino's Pizza Hot one, but
or the yellow submarine with Pennzoil.
Yeah,
and Target.
Well, yeah, those are other great ones. Like in NASCAR, we always remember Dale Earnhardt with the Wrangler car and the GM Goodwrench car. Rusty Wallace with the Kodiak car and the Miller, whatever number of Miller brands that he had. You had Tony, like Josh mentioned, with the Home Depot, and then he had Office Depot when he won his third championship in Mobile One. You had like Jimmy was with Lowe's forever. Dennis was with FedEx, and now only recently FedEx, which is a multi-billion-dollar freaking corporation, they just gave freaking Scotty Scheffler, I think, about $25 million or whatever for winning the FedEx Cup in a year that he won like 50 something. I mean, you're telling me they just gave one guy $25 million, but they can't figure out a way to fund a cup car? Get the hell out of here. It's there. You're telling me that FedEx doesn't want to pay these prices anymore. And there's no reason why they can't just write it off, because that's what this is. All these rich motherfuckers, they can write that shit off. That's all it is.
Just write it off, Seinfeld.
Yeah. That's all they're doing. I mean, what are all these goddamn companies doing? It's marketing. They can put it off as marketing. They don't want to drop $40 million to go and promote their brand. I mean, you got Xfinity. Xfinity is dropping all that money as one of the primary partners, but then they're also connected with NASCAR because, of course, the Francis have to have their hands in every one of these sponsor deals too. That's this whole other thing in itself. But
yeah,
I don't know. This is it's getting old. Like, I mean, it's like Fat Felon. I don't really like the guy. I don't care for him. But it's tired. He's right. He's tired because he's old and fat, but he's tired of this bullshit. And after decades of him making money, marketing off of the sport, and now he basically markets his own brand on one of the cars, and even he's fed up with it. So when you got the main guy, the guy that wins more than anybody, and he ain't happy, I think you probably got a problem. And that's before you consider all the marketing minds there is in 2311 and Bob Jenkins, who has went from being the absolute drizzling shits to having two cars that are competitive week in and week out, and building a team that's going to be like basically a feeder system for Ford, with all these young drivers that they have, because they employ 4 of them starting next year. So let's see what happens with that. And then Kyle Larson, I mean, they signed a 2-year deal with him, so I don't understand what the big deal is. It's the few days before the IndyCar finale, and then you're announcing Kyle Larson's coming back for the Indy 500. You could have waited till next week. It would have been a little bit more. It would have made a lot more sense next week after the season ended, just to keep them on the front page and say, "Oh yeah, Larson ran really well at Indy. Didn't get the chance to go to the 600." It would be a better marketing ploy for both series, because then, depending on what happens to Larson at Watkins Glen, then they'd be like, "Oh, he missed the Coca-Cola 600. He didn't get a chance to race in it because of the weather. Now he's in a position where he might not make the second round." Like, you could have worked that, but he's going to run the double again. I think from what it says here, history will leave that race to make the start of the Coca-Cola 600. Means cutting the race shorter. And whether Tony will get in the car,
which you can't do. You can't have the backup jump in, but Tony Kanaan is going to do the rookie recertification, or whatever you do, whatever you call it, in October. So he'll do that. But I mean, I guess it was always going to happen, I think. But this was, I think, the second year was always an option year. to do it as a 2-year, but the second one was an option, so that's why they had to, re-announce and I guess exercise the option. So yeah, hope for good weather, and like I guess they had today in Charlotte, there was only one cloud in the sky, so hopefully good weather at both sites next year.
Yeah, I mean that's really because what was it? I think Tony ran it, and Tony tried to do it 3 different times. He ran it. He got through it twice. Or no, why do I think that in 01 he didn't finish the race and
No,
he had
he
to get
did.
out of the car. Okay, he did finish the race in 01. It's
He
and
did the
it
double
was
in 99 and 01.
in
It
01. Yeah,
was
that's why I
Robbie
don't know.
Gordon.
Yeah, Robbie Gordon wasn't able to. Robbie Gordon did it in um in 2000. Yeah, Robbie Gordon wasn't able to, and he came back late, and he had PJ Jones in the car. I guess I remember Richie Hearn running for. They had him as the stand-in driver, like um the stand-in, or if Tony had to leave. I just remember that. I don't know if there was the double. I'm assuming it was the double year, but and I thought that Richie Hearn got in the car, but he did run the double. He came back to the 600, started tailback, finished third. Jeff Burton won that race. And then in 99, he should have won his first career race, and he was puking because he didn't. Their whole entire fitness and diet routine was outstanding. But yeah, I mean, I get it. The option and getting Antoine Canan to take his refresher course to go and get back in the car, and he is one of the lead people at the Arrow McLaren team. So, I mean, he's been in the simulator probably anyway. So now just getting in the car, letting him go and run that test, and he'll be fine because, of course, it's one of his best racetracks, former winner, putting them in a position where they have both angles covered. Yes, they want Larson to run the whole race and get to Indy in Charlotte, run the 600. But if worse comes to worse, they have a former Indianapolis 500 champion and IndyCar champion to jump in the car. So McLaren is able to put themselves in a position to keep that car in the race. Of course, they fell half a lap short of winning the Indianapolis 500 this year. So they're one of the better teams. So this is an opportunity for them with Kyle Larson. So at least on the IndyCar side, they knew that they had to do it. I know that McLaren wanted to do it. And Zach Brown, always thinking of the marketing side of things, that's part of his deal. But now, of course, Hendrick coming out and saying, he's going to come back to the 600. And that's fine and well. In the end, after missing a race, he only lost the regular season by a point. So Kyle Larson ran pretty damn well, I gotta say. When you give the field a race and you still almost win the regular season championship, I think it's fine that he stayed at the Indianapolis 500. But that's whatever. We'll see what happens next May with that. We will move on to NFL Week 1. And, I mean, as I said, the Niners were able to win yesterday on Monday Night Football. Aaron made it more than 4 plays. The worms weren't going through his brain, but his play in general was pretty rusty. Looked like a guy that's been spending more time at the golf course and in dark prison cells or whatever the fuck than actually playing. The Jets were okay, but they were not able to keep up points wise. And this is with the Niners just basically playing field goal football because Jake Moody's leg is insane. Him and Kaimi Fairbairn were trying to figure out how many 50-plus yard field goals they could kick in a week between the two of them, because that game could have been way worse if they could have actually converted in the red zone. And that kind of exposes a weakness of the offense in general, even with all the great weapons they have. Their red zone efficiency is not exactly the greatest. The offensive line is improved. Of course, Trent Williams coming back, basically taking the whole summer off, was able to be the GOAT that he is, future Hall of Famer. It was the night that they inducted Frank Gore into the 49ers Hall of Fame. One of my favorite players of all time that played for the 49ers, and he gets inducted. You had Alex Smith, of course, Vernon Davis, all these guys that played with him, Joe Staley. I mean, so many people, and he's so beloved as a player. One of the toughest MFers there was in the league, and he played a lot of football for bad teams, and then got that shot when Jim Harbaugh came around and played his ass off for Jim Harbaugh. And then after that run ended, he started jumping around to different teams. He played for the Jets. I think he played for he played for 3/4 of the AFC East at one point. So game itself was solid. Defense had some moments. I mentioned Bosa getting mugged, but relatively speaking, getting out of that game without any crazy, serious injuries. Beating a Jets team that I think as the season goes on is probably going to be a lot better. How much better, I don't know. Is it enough to go and save Bob Saleh? I don't know about that either. I think the New York teams are going to be in the market for coaches again and GMs after this season, but that's just my thoughts. As I mentioned, also my fantasy teams, I went 2-2. Dynasty team won. We have a pretty solid team for that dynasty. Won in the league that I won last year. Lost in my league because Joe had every freaking person known to man go off. What was it? He had Kermit and then Anthony Richardson as his quarterbacks. He had Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, and Jahmyr Gibbs. So Derwin James got 13 points as well. Wide receivers didn't really do a whole lot, but did enough. IDPs were whatever. It's crazy to think that if he had played Zeke somehow, he would have lost points. My mistake was not playing Chris Godwin and Baker Mayfield, and I don't know if I would have won or not, but I could have given myself a chance to if I'd played those two guys. Also, J.K. Dobbins, who I was having thoughts one way or the other in the Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman offense. J.K. Dobbins has proven that he's a very good player when he's on the field. The problem is he's not usually on the field. There was a split of carries between him and I'm forgetting the guy's name now, but the other running back for the Chargers, I think he played for Buffalo at one point, but no, Zach Moss is the one that played for Buffalo, I think, right? And then he played for Indy last year. Now he's in Cincinnati. But either way, Dobbins had a really good game week one, so we'll see how long he can stay upright. And my week two matchup will be. Oh yeah, that's right. Matt had an insane week one, scored 255 points. And that was largely to do, Tyreek Hill, after getting arrested, put up 7 for 130 and a touchdown on. Then Mike Evans had 5 for 61 and 2 touchdowns. Saquon had 41 points. Ramondre Stevenson had nearly 30 there. Stephon Diggs actually had a 2-touchdown day. Tua threw for 338 and a score. And then, so that was that. And then all his IDPs were nuts. He got 68 points out of his IDPs, which is absolutely insane. Micah Parsons had 3 solo tackles, 1 assist, a sack, and a TFL and a pass deflection. TJ Edwards had 10 tackles, solo tackles, 5 assisted tackles, 2 TFLs, and a fumble recovery. Justin Reed had 8 tackles, solo, and an assist. So, unbelievable performance there. 255 points. That might end up being the high point score for the whole entire freaking season. So we'll see what happens with that. And Josh, it was the Jaguars playing Miami, and wasn't ideal. And then in terms of your team on Sunday, lost to Steve by 14 points in week one. But I think, when you look at your team, you had great productivity out of your quarterbacks. IDPs played really well as well. Running backs were okay, but the wide receiver play really killed you there in week one. And even if you had tried to substitute with some of your other options, none of the wide receivers showed up. So you were kind of screwed no matter what you did on that one. But I'm more curious I'm curious about what you thought about your fantasy teams, but I'm also curious about what you're thinking right now after week one and what the Jaguars did, especially in the second half. It was a relatively close game. They were in the game through the first half, and then inexplicably you have a franchise quarterback, but you didn't allow him to throw the ball.
Yeah, I don't really get what was up with that. Trevor Lawrence paid him a lot of money in the offseason, and then we allow him to throw 7 times or attempt 7 times in the second half. I don't know what's up with that. Granted, of course, if Travis Etienne doesn't fumble the ball going into the end zone, then this is a different story. They would have gone up 24-7, and then that could have been the ball game, or possibly put the game up on wrap, and it would have been too much for Miami to come back from. And then immediately after that, Miami got an 80-yard touchdown and there. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see. First half, Trevor Lawrence was cooking in that, and he was had really good deep throws they were using the deep play action game. Brian Thomas Jr. was cooking Jalen Ramsey, the former Jaguar, of course, which I was glad to see that. And he was giving the trash talk back to him, like Ramsey's done so many times over the years there. So, I was really looking forward to, seeing that win. But then, they beat themselves again. So, hopefully it's only week one. But then, seemingly it's like the defense, Peterson blamed the defense in the day after conference, and he said, he basically didn't take any accountability for the offense, and said, well, we had still got to work on things on defense. And I'm like, well, defensively they had a great game and basically limited the Dolphins in both their passing and running game, because the only thing Tua did other than that touchdown and a couple of tosses to Jalen Waddle was throw screen passes all day to running backs. And it's like, well, what does Tua even do? Like, is he even a quarterback? Because like that's all he was doing, just throwing screen passes and everything. Like, how they paid that guy a lot of money to throw really basic stuff? And Trevor Lawrence on the other hand is like, he had a god tier throw to Brian Thomas in the back corner of the end zone in the first half. Like, that's probably like one of the best throws I've ever seen. And they go and lose the game. So I don't know. We'll see. We got the Cleveland Browns coming up. So maybe with the comments or the articles on Deshaun Watson popping up again, maybe there's some bad juju there, and they'll just like play poorly, and Jacksonville can take care of business at home. So open up the season here against the Cleveland Browns at home. So we'll see what happens there. But don't fumble, and the Jaguars for whatever reason are still not good enough to overcome their own mistakes. So seems like that's been the case in the Peterson era for the most part, other than that one playoff game and that one hot streak where they were able to kind of swing things back into on their side in terms of momentum. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but that's not the ideal start there. But again, it's only week one, 17-week season. And oh, by the way, I did put $20 on Hard Rock for Jacksonville to win the Super Bowl. So I'm totally homer here. So whatever. And all that. So fantasy wise, my quarterbacks did well. Geno Stroud did well in that game. Running backs, he did okay. Not great, but solid effort. Derrick Henry wasn't really used outside of the first quarter. Jonathan Taylor, I don't know how much he was used, but didn't have a lot that he didn't have a touchdown, or he did have a touchdown, but didn't have too many rushing yards or receptions in that game. Laporta didn't really produce. Marvin Harrison Jr. only got 1 point, or like one catch for like 2 yards or something like that, 4 yards. So barely any points there. So that was pitiful. DJ Moore, of course, I guess decent RB2 or WR2 points there, even though it was under his projection. Rashee Rice, of course, on Steve's side, balled out. Nico Collins balled out. It was the guy that I wanted, was Nico Collins. Or Tank Dell. Tank Dell is who I wanted, but I thought, Tank Dell would be a good pick, or Nico Collins, one of those guys. But regardless, so could have started Brian Robinson Jr., I guess, as running back, and that would have gotten points. But I don't know if it would have been enough to win. So maybe 11 points. Probably not, actually. But that certainly would have been an option there. Maybe I started Brandon Ayuk instead of Marvin Harrison Jr. Probably could have gotten the job done there, or Keon Coleman. That would have been enough. So, but it's hard to predict. Fantasy is just luck, really, when you think about it. So, just getting lucky, which I don't even really like the word luck, but that's kind of what it is. So, that's our league. 0-1 there. Have to make some moves to get back into the game here for week 2. My work league, which, funny enough, at work we got my friend or coworker that's running the league's got like a banner in the office, like where our cubes are, and got a banner of all our draft picks. So it's pretty nice there with everybody's team and who they picked and all that. So I thought it was pretty cool from that. Which I mean that one's not going to be one that I really pay attention to, or well, I mean I will pay attention to it, but the reward, there isn't really an award, so won't really care too much if it I get a lose or whatever, just as long as I beat my coworkers that I care about in that league. So that one though, I lost 78 to 125 against one of my other coworkers. So yeah, that's not good. I had Kyler Murray, I had Bijan Robinson who did good, Bijan, Tony Pollard, Marvin Harrison. So I have Marvin Harrison in both my this league and my work league, and that did not turn out great. And Malik Neighbors. So I got 2 rookies. I should probably change that, but he got 9 points though. So that's good there. Sam Laporta. I also have Sam Laporta in both my leagues, so I don't know how that happened. Amari Cooper, Cameron Dicker, the kicker, the Browns defense, and my backups: Justin Herbert, Javonte Williams, Calvin Ridley, Jackson Smith, Njiga, and Dallas Goedert. So we'll see how that goes next week. Different setup league, more of a standard PPR league, I think. So we'll have to go from there. But have to make some waiver wire moves here. Definitely, probably some players I got to pick up here in both leagues to see who I can get. But should be interesting, especially with the I guess waiver order for this week. So yeah, that's fantasy this week. So took the L there, took the L the NFL. I mean, college, the Gators won, but it probably doesn't matter because it was Sanford, and I mean that's the team that they should be beating. So it might be their only win of the year, depending on how the rest of the year goes. But that's all right. Hopefully, Billy Napier gets fired there and everything. So yeah, we'll see how it goes next week. Definitely looking forward to watching at least watching on TV the home opener for Jacksonville and seeing how that goes. Of course, still fairly warm here in September. It was warm in Miami for the season opener. It'll probably be warm, although we did get rain this week here in Florida throughout. So we'll see what the weather is like on Sunday, and hopefully a decent game, and hopefully they win.
Yeah, it's too early. I mean, there are certain teams that probably are already thinking about the draft, like the Giants and the Carolina Panthers, but there are plenty of teams that are in the mix. It's only 1 week. Getting through with relative health is the big one, and so you never know. 1 week, like it's the same thing as Briscoe. 1 week you could be a hero, next week you're the fire. It's like 1 week you're the dog, 1 week you're the fire hydrant, and so could see what happens with that moving forward. Okay, so yeah, the GSP Roundup. Let us go to WRC Rally Greece. And it was going to be Rally Greece. The results was Thierry Neuville getting the victory over in a Hyundai 123 over his teammates Daniel Sordo and Octanic. Sami Pajari. That is crazy. In a WRC2 car, finished 4th overall, and won the race on the WRC2. WRC2 cars went from 4th all the way through to 13th. Then Jordan Sedaris was the next Rally 1 car. You have Sebastian Ogier, who was 16th overall. So that's the results in Greece. Then you have the point standings heading into Chile. The one of the last three races. You have Chile, you have England. I think that is your Austrian. Okay, Central European. So it wasn't the whatever world rally England. You have Austria, Czech, German stages there. So 3 rallies, 3 races to go. The championship standings. Thierry Neuville takes a 34-point lead into the last 3 rounds and a 38-point lead on Sebastian. So Neuville over Tanek. Ogier is 4 points behind Tanek. Alfred Evans is 4th. Adrian Fourmeau 5th. The World Superbikes at Magny Cours this past weekend. The results in France there. Michael Vandermark gets the win in race 1. Superpole race, Nicolo Balega gets the win in the Superpole in the race 2. Race 1 was Vandermark, Bautista, Petrucci. Sprint race was Balega, Lowe's, and Danilo Petrucci. Then Nicolo Balega, Danilo Petrucci, and Garrett Gerloff, who, with his 3rd place finish in that race, moves himself up to 10th in points. 38 points behind Remy Gardner there. So we'll see. And Garrett Gerloff right now is ahead of Johnny, multi-time world champion Johnny Ray. So interesting there. Toprak Raskatlioglu is 55 points ahead of Balega. He had the long winning streak going back. Was it 4 rounds? He had won every single race, so that was like 12 in a row. Before the race in the Assen, where it started in race 2 in Assen and went on. So interesting there for Raskatlioglu trying to go for a second championship in the World Rally Championship. Formula 2 at Baku. F2, so there's a lot of driver changes. ART has Luke Browning coming in for the remainder of the season. Christian Mansell racing for Trident. Gabriele Mini will be filling in for Ollie Bierman for Prema. After Ollie Bierman got called up for Kevin Magnussen's ban. Leo Fornaroli, the champion in Formula 3, goes to Invicta Racing for their season in 2025. The standings going into that race, Isaac Hadjar has a 10.5-point lead on Gabriel Bortoletto, 30 points on Zane Maloney, 41 on Paul Aaron, and 60 on Jack Crawford, who is 6 points ahead of Andre Kimi Antonelli, 9 points ahead of Franco Colapinto there in Formula 2. And then we will move to Supercars, the Sandown 500, the throwback race for the Sandown 500 shows, of course, the Castro livery for Tickford. And showing all that. The standings. Will Brown has 81-point lead on Chaz Mostert. Then Brock Feeney, Cam Waters, and Matthew Payne round out top 5 in the point standings. And NHRA at Maple Grove to open their 2024 countdown. Going and looking at his standings now that they've been reset in all 4 pro categories. In top fuel, even though Doug Coletta failed to qualify for the U.S. Nationals, still maintains a points lead by 15 over Justin Ashley, minus 28 overall is Coletta's teammate John Langdon, and Torrance and Tron Brown rounding out the top 5. Tony Stewart is in 7th, minus 77, ahead of 2 champions and Tony Schumacher and Brittany Force. So we'll see what happens there. Brittany Force had her bachelorette party at this past weekend, so she was looking pretty good. Austin Prock has a 39-point lead on Bob Tasca. In Funny Car, another further 7 points, minus 46 back Matt Hagan. And then J.R. Todd was minus 54. Proc coming off of winning the U.S. Nationals in Funny Car. Then you have Pro Stock. Dallas Glenn ends up he ends up the points leader, only 25 ahead of Aaron Stanfield, who won the U.S. Nationals and actually doubled up into second class. So good for Stanfield. Essentially pulling a Pat Austin. Gage Herrera's points lead reset to 20 after dominating. Richard Gadsden minus 33, John Hall minus 46. So that's the battle heading into Maple Grove this coming weekend. Alrighty then. So let's move forward to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. You had went first for a couple of these things. So the bring up Formula One. Josh, I'll let you go first here to talk about the Adrian Newey signing. Of course, legend, probably arguably the greatest designer in Formula One history, designing World Championship winning cars for 3 different organizations. And now he joins Stroll F1. So does Stroll F1 take that step forward? Do they become a championship contender with all the investments that have been made with Fred Alonso? Or do they continue down the path that they've always been on?
That's a really interesting question because Fernando has been around for quite a long time and been waiting to see if he would ever win a championship ever again here in F1. And now Adrian Newey has come to Aston Martin here and possibly could win another race if they design a well enough car. So that's a really good question here to see if Adrian Newey he'll join next year. So currently working on special projects for Red Bull here, but now could join Aston Martin. It's only going to go as far as the money takes them, really, and he could have something that could help them. So definitely looking forward to seeing this partnership play out. Maybe Fernando Alonso somehow wins the race here, given Adrian Newey's talent, but that's probably wishful thinking. And I don't think Lance Stroll will ever amount to anything in Formula One. So Lance Stroll, of course, will continue to be the same driver that he's always been here in F1. So it'll be interesting to see how much he can prove driving a Adrian Newey car here. So looking at F1 though, I guess here Azerbaijan Grand Prix, it should be interesting here, this battle with McLaren and Red Bull. Red Bull, of course, going throughout the season here, hanging on to the constructors title lead, and McLaren chasing them. Of course, Baku, very fast circuit, high-end top speeds, which we haven't really seen that too much this year. So it'd be interesting to see McLaren or possibly even Mercedes kind of pop into this battle here this weekend at Baku circuit. Red Bull, they've got to bring their game up here to close the season, but we'll see what happens. So I'm gonna say that Max Verstappen wins this race. So they figure it out, and the fast circuit of Baku on long straights and then the tight city corners, I think they get it done. And then my podium, I'm going to say that I'll say that Piastri finishes second and Norris finishes third. That's what I'll say.
Okay. Yeah, it's a 4-team race now. Currently, you never know who's going to be there. Ferrari brought specific upgrades at Monza. Wildo's work at Baku, I don't know about that. Mercedes was a bit off at times during the Italian Grand Prix weekend. Baku has not exactly been one of their better circuits during the Hamilton era. So will they be able to do something there? Not so sure about it. Red Bull trying to maintain their Constructors' Championship lead. McLaren, of course, running better, like Josh said. So I will go with Piastri for the win. I'll say Fish Lips for second. And in third, I will actually go Charles Leclerc. So those are my picks for Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Piastri to win with Fish Lips and Leclerc rounding out the podium. All right. So when it comes to Aston Martin, like you talked about the money, Josh, it also goes with what Honda brings to the table in 2026 with the new power unit regulations. What kind of mood Alonso is in at that point. If he goes back to what he was feeling like or thinking when he was at McLaren with Honda, or will he be his old championship self? All to be determined on that end. The IndyCar, Music City, Grand Prix is the season finale. It'll be on the oval at Nashville Superspeedway. In terms of my picks to win and to be my wild card, I'm going to actually pick Scott McLaughlin, even though I know that he has no chance at the championship if Alex Palou was able to make it all the way. 2-day show, only everything, all the practice and qualifying will be on Saturday, and then Sunday is only the race, along with the IndyCar race with the Indy Lights race as well. I'm going to say that Palou holds on and wins a championship, but I'm not going to say he's going to win. I'm going to say Scotty McLaughlin, who's trying to poison Alex Palou with homemade sushi, then talking about locking Palou in a porta potty. Basically, anything he can do to keep himself in the championship. Scotty McLaughlin has mentioned at some point on the socials because he's a funny guy. So I'll say Scotty gets the win. McLaughlin to win. My wild card selection for Nashville. Dang, this is hard. You know what? I hate his guts, but root beer floathead. Wild
That's
card.
a good pick.
He's been really good this whole year. Has a chance to get AJ Foyt a top 10 finish in points. And he's one of the ones that is pretty, he nuts up on these ovals, so we'll see if he's able to run that high, wide, and handsome line. Wild card, and then Palou ends up the champion. What say you, Josh?
It's gonna be interesting. Well, I'm gonna have to. I want to see the championship actually mean something here in this race, so I'm gonna pick Will Power to win the Music City Grand Prix on the oval here. So I'll pick him, and then I guess my wild card. Go with. I want to see who's a good wild card. I have a name that I'm thinking of, but I want to confirm it here on the standings. I'm gonna go with David Malukas. Yeah, go with him. So, yeah, that's who I pick.
David Malukas, who's moving over to AJ Foyt Racing and possibly taking over that 14 car. Ferrucci trying to keep a ride. And if they do that, and it's those two guys, you want to talk about young and with a lot of potential, those two guys, if they were to stay together at AJ Foyt Racing. Go to picks, and then there's Malukas wild card. So the last two races before your segment, Josh, will get into what's it called? Get into the Cup and Xfinity series. The Xfinity, there's Submission 200 at the Glen. There are 41 cars for 38 spots. The 87s being entered by Jordan Anderson. Yeah, Jade Buford, who used to drive for Scott Borchetta. You have R.C. Enerson, the former IndyCar driver. Pizza Face in the 15. William Byron in the 17. Keebler Gibbs in the 19. Eric Almirola in the 20. Those Ed Jones in the 26. Austin Green in the 32. Thomas Annunziata for Joey Gase Motorsports. Annunziata's from Jersey. Weatherman 36. They got. Then I talked about 87. Connor Zilic will be in the 88. Ross Chastain will be in the 92. SVG trying to go and get a fourth win on the season. And then Alon Day, who his last appearance in an Xfinity car, he ripped the whole entire left side off of his car at Chicago because he came up to the wreck scene and just destroyed his car. So we'll see what happens there. Who do you think, Josh, is a good chance here in the Mission 200? Only 8 laps shorter than the Cup race, which has always been weird to me, but a good preparation for those Cup guys.
Yeah, definitely good preparation for those Cup guys, but I'm going to go with SVG to get his 4th win on the year here at Watkins Glen, which, I mean, this is probably the race that's most similar or that NASCAR drivers are more comfortable with, but I think he can get it done here at Watkins Glen. And then my wild card, can go with the number 88, Connor Zilic, and see how he does in his run here with the 88 car that'll run next year.
Accomplished road racer, getting that experience. He has a good chance to be one of the better drivers of the regulars, even though he's not really a regular, but he will be. You have so many Cup guys and girls in there, so you'll see how those guys run. For me, I am going to pick Keebler Gibbs to win, since you got SVG. So Keebler Gibbs to win. And my wild card for the race on Saturday is I am going to go. I'm going to go with Austin Green. He's been really consistent in his limited starts. And of course, his pedigree speaks to his ability in an Xfinity car, since his dad, David, and uncle, Jeff, are both champions of the series. So, see what happens with those 2 or these 4 drivers. As we move, last but not least, to the Cup Series at Watkins Glen. Let me bring up the entry list for. So on the entry list page, you have 38 for 40, so nobody's going home. Trying to go through some of these sponsors. Bed Bath and Beyond on Barry's car. Bed Bath and Beyond, yeah. So the 10 of Noah Gagson also has it. And then you got those drivers there. So you picked SVG for Xfinity. I'm gonna pick them for Cup. And it's in part because of the tires that they're going to be using. The tire that's going to wear out more.
Slower.
Yeah. And in terms of tire conservation, on a road course, I don't think there's anybody else in the field that probably is better at it than SVG. I'm just going to go and be a total homer, and my wild card is Juan Pablo Montoya. JPM wild card. He is a former winner at Watkins Glen, but I mean, he's one of the greatest there's ever been in my lifetime. So why wouldn't he go out there and put on a show in what might be his last NASCAR race? But we'll see what happens. That 2311 car has been relatively competitive when they've run that third car. The results may not have shown it, but they've been competitive when they showed up. So those are my picks. You get to close that part, Josh, in terms of your picks for the Cup Series at the Glen.
Well, nobody tells Juan Pablo Montoya how to race. Nobody. That's that old Juicy Fruit commercial from 2008. That sticks with me to this day. So, damn, I wanted to use that one, but I still did it. But yeah, so as that's what I wanted. But no, I think for me, in this one, I'm gonna go with. I mean, this is actually kind of wide open here. I don't know. Go with. I will just go chalk and go say Kyle Larson on the heels of this Indy 500 announcement goes out and wins the race here this Sunday. And I guess my wild card will be AJ Allmendinger in the